And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange! 145!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening, good morning, good whatever time it is, everyone. You are looking at a live view of the Falcon 9 Block 5 rocket atop SpaceX's launch pad Slick 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We're just under 40 minutes away from launch from the planned 11:58 p.m. Liftoff time, where the vehicle will place 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. I'm Trevor Sesnick, a writer, reporter, and editor here at NSF, and I'll be your host tonight. And I see a lot of 5x5s in chat, so thank you everyone very much for that. And on that note, as always, if you have any questions for us, please tag us in chat with @NASASpaceflight, and they'll be added to a queue, and we will later answer them. With me today, I have Alex. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Finally seeing another booster hitting another record. 16 flights. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's exciting. We'll talk a lot more about that in a second, but first we need to introduce our field member, Max. Max, how's it out there in Florida today?
Hey, good evening, everybody. You know what? It is very soupy. It feels almost like Jurassic Park without humid it is today. But we are all out here ready for booster B1058's Sweet 16.
Yeah. So on that note, Alex, could you tell us what's so significant about the 16th flight we keep talking about and just give us a general mission overview, please?
Yeah, so this flight is going to be the 16th flight of B1058. This booster first flew in May 2020, flying with a very special mission, Demo 2, with Bob and Doug, returning human capability, basically human spaceflight to the United States. And it flew another 14 times, and then after its 15th flight, it was sort of put apart from the fleet, and then it was inspected and thoroughly studied so that SpaceX, it is able to ensure that these boosters can fly all the way to 20 flights without major refurbishment. So the idea is that they do this sort of in-depth study with this booster, and also B1060 is the other booster that had this in-depth study as well. And once they do that, they are ensured that any other booster, because they are pretty much built sort of the same, right? So once you do it with two of them and you have this data, you can say, okay, well, if I just refurbish them as normal, I can keep going. And that's what they did with 10 flights, and that's what they have done as well again with 15 flights. And hopefully today, B1058 is gonna confirm that indeed it's pretty much good to go for another 5 flights. And so today's mission is the Starlink Group 6-5 mission. It is launching another batch of Starlink V2 mini satellites, 22 of them, into the Starlink second generation constellation. And so hopefully we'll see a little bit more of internet satellites up there providing internet to all of those that do use Starlink. I know a few of them here at NSF that do use it. So hopefully that improves a little bit. And it's also the last launch before. So like this launch, not this one, but the next one is going to be the last one of the Starlink V1.5 satellites. So, them launching V2 minis is quite a big deal because now it's all that is left in town right now. So this is going to be one of those that are just going to be accumulating all over the rest of the year. Because man, I've been updating my spreadsheets of these communications permits that they file for these launches, and there's so many Starlink missions. There's like 25 launches coming up just until like October or November. It's crazy, and there's even a Group 7 mission as well, like Group 7-1 that has popped up today. So yeah, a lot of Starlink missions that we're gonna see.
Yeah, and on that note, it's right, there's only one more launch of V1.5 satellites, and then all future Starlink missions will be V2 and V2 Mini until, of course, V3, V4, and whatever. So that's exciting, and that mission is launching next week. So Max, you said that it's a soupy day out there. How is the weather looking for launch, though?
Last time I checked, weather is looking great, and going off of the Mark 1 eyeballs, that forecast seems to be holding. There's a bit of high-level clouds, a bit of high-level haze, but otherwise, I'm seeing plenty of stars. Wind is calm. Everything is looking good.
Awesome. So Alex, here's a question for you from Mark. Is it known if they replace engines and how often they replace them on these Falcon 9 boosters between refurbishment?
Yeah, so we do know that at least components sometimes get replaced from flight to flight. We don't know when that happens or like if it's after every flight. We have no idea about those kind of details, but we do know that sometimes when they change an engine, for example, or they change a major component, they like to test the booster on the pad before the launch because that ensures that they have that extra data to be sure that it's going to be working just fine. And strangely, this mission, it's the 16th flight of this booster. It is the first time they've flown, they fly for a 16th time one of these booster, and it has not performed any sort of pre-launch testing on the pad. So this is the first time that since its last launch that this booster is being fueled and its engines ignited and everything. So it's quite a big deal because it probably means that even though they inspected it a lot and they learned a lot of things and whatever, right? It might not have been that big of a deal in terms of the changes that actually happened to this booster between its 15th flight and its 16th flight, which at the end of the day, that's what they're looking for, right? That, future boosters, like there's B1062 that it's going to reach 15th flight next week. There's also B1061 that is also going to reach 15th flight. So when they do the next one, the 16th flight, like this one, like B1058, right? Once they reach that 16th flight, they don't need this big refurbishment, big overhaul kind of thing. They can just, refurbish it as normal and keep going all the way to 20.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And on your screen right now, you can see the liquid
Jamie.
oxygen tank on the first stage starting to get nice and frosty, and the vapor coming off of that in the very humid air, as Max has been telling us today. So here's another one for you, Alex. How many Starlink V2 satellites are there in orbit right now?
Oh boy. I can look it up on the Jonathan McDowell website because I don't know that stuff off the top of my head. I'm sorry. So they have launched 86 of them. With this, it will be 108, I believe, because it's like 22 plus 86. Trying to do that live is not really ideal, but yeah. And then 10 of them have already re-entered, so it will be 76 right now that are in orbit for these V2 mini satellites. But yeah, there's many more coming
Yeah,
up.
and it's probably worth noting that a lot of those 10 that re-entered were from the first launch of Starlink V2 mini satellites, where they had some teething pains and decided to just safely deorbit and ensure that these larger satellites are able to deorbit cleanly. So the failure rate is not as high as that figure would lead you to believe.
Yeah, the first launch had 6 failed satellites, apparently, like 6 of them re-entered The second launch of V2 minis had one, and then a few other it's like a sprinkler kind of thing that, and a few of them here and there have re-entered from other flights. But yeah, in total 10 out of 86. But as you
Yeah.
mentioned, the first one was sort of like a test. So you see like 6, and then the next one is like 1. The other one 1, the other one 2. So yeah, it's not really that many after the first one.
Yeah. Let me go real quick to some very generous support. Gregory Johnson became a PadRat member. Thank you very much for your support. We Will Rocket You gifted 1 Red Team membership, so you get some exclusive behind-the-scenes content and all of that. Thank you for your support. Music Wolves, a regular here on stream, is asking how long until this booster is likely to fly again. What would be your best guess? Let's go around the horn on this one, Alex, and then Max, and then I'll give my opinion.
I think 2 or 3 months. That's my bet.
Yeah, Max, how about you?
It really depends on how well tonight goes. They could have a failure of anything at any point, which is critical to keep in mind, whether it be on Ascent or on landing. So, if they get through tonight successfully, my guess is, depending on the damage and the refurb needed, maybe 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. That's generally been the average turnaround time of these older boosters. So unfortunately, we all agreed, which I guess is a good thing. Next thing, we have a super chat from Ryan Weber. At this point, we know all too well we are going to see sparks fly, and the fearless Falcon 9 will break another record. Fantastic references, Ryan, and thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. Goldwolf67 gifted 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much for your support. And if you got one of those, please also thank him in chat, because you get some awesome perks. You get to see what it's like to be a member and support us, so thank you. Nathan became a Capcom member, which gives you support, or which gives you access to our awesome members Discord server, where you can come talk to Jack about bacon, or Alex about Falcon 9, or Chris about horses and shuttle. It's an awesome place. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, there's a lot of sports talk in there as well. Music Wallops with another very good question. When was the last time this booster conducted a static fire?
That's a great question. I don't remember. Because I think the last 2 were... So this is interesting. We were actually talking about this before the live stream. So the last time this booster flew from this pad was a year ago. It was July 7th on the Starlink Group 4-21 flight. After that, it flew 2 times from LC-39A, and then it basically, it hit 15 flights. So it did all of the stuff that we talked about with the study and whatnot. And so the last 2 flights were from LC-39A. This is the first time in a year since it's been here at Slick 40. I do not remember this booster doing any sort of a static fire on those 2 flights at LC-39A, so it's probably more than a year. A year or more since it was the last time that this booster static fired. At Slick 40 is a little bit more complicated, because there's not a lot of visibility out there and things like that. So it might have, I don't remember right now if it did at that time, but it was a few flights ago, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty interesting to see when SpaceX decides to conduct a static fire at this point, since they are quite infrequent. Well, outside of McGregor, they test them all the time. Jeff Rao says he gifted 1 Red Team membership. Thank you for that gift. And again, if you got that, always thank him in chat. Thank you for the support. Nick Nut Nerd says, Demo 2 is the first spaceflight that I watched, and now 1,138 days later, I'm about to go to the University of Alabama in Huntsville to study computer science and go work in the aerospace industry. Go B1058. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you were able to be inspired by the awesome work that these launch companies do. Here's a question for you, Max, by XRT Matrix. Is the humidity going to cause any interesting views of the rocket or plume, or also the sound?
In terms of visuals, it shouldn't be much different. If anything, it will add to the haze, so the view out to the pad will be a little less crisp. But in terms of the sound, with the air being a lot thicker than it would normally be, the sound should carry a lot better. So we are about 4 miles here from the pad tonight, and there goes the T-minus 20-minute vent. The sound should be, yeah, speaking of plumes, the sound should be very punchy tonight. So the thicker the air, and given depending on what the wind direction does as well, that can have a huge effect on what the sound does, depending on where you are.
Yeah, let's hope for some awesome audio tonight. Okay, so a few questions that'll combine into one for you, Alex. Whitney and John Cook asks what kind of refurbishment the booster went for this flight. And then on a similar note, Nathan asks, do we know why the booster took just shy of 7 months to refly? Could you just talk a little bit about those two things?
I'm going to do 2 in 1 here, because we're also seeing here the T-minus 20-minute vent. This is as usual to purge the lines, after the second stage has been loaded with RP1 kerosene. They sort of close everything, and then they start pumping in nitrogen to purge and clear the lines and everything, and chill them as well ahead of the liquid oxygen load onto that second stage, which should begin in about 2.5 minutes from now. So the other part, the questions, why is it that it took 7 months, and what did they do? We don't fully know what they actually did. We can guess, bit of a educated guess, so to speak, that what they did was mainly look into every system, every component, and make sure that all of these components were up to spec already at 15 flights, that it was still very good to pretty much ready to go again. Doing a lot of testing, a lot of, most of the time, just component testing and taking out parts and seeing, okay, well, this still works. This can go for another 5 flights and things like that. And the same thing is going on with B-1060. It also flew 7 months ago, the beginning of January, and so those checks and those that testing really takes a long time. They did the same with B-1051 and B-1049. It took also a long time for them to come back for their 11th flight. So when they did the 10th flight of them, they took them apart from the fleet. They did all of these inspections and things like that. I do not have off the top of my head how long it took for them, but I do remember it was a long time. We were waiting quite a while. Yeah, for 51 it was 6 months. I'm looking here at the stats, and then for 49 it was even longer, because its 11th flight was also its last flight. So it was waiting on the payload because it was needed for an expendable launch. So that one actually took longer.
Yeah, it's awesome. We have a few more super chats. One from Astro Adventure. Just recently got an internship offer at Blue Origin. Hope to see y'all down there. I saw Chris G once at CSG 2. I'm jealous that you saw that launch, because I was in Florida for that, and then the weather looked super good, and then it kept getting worse and worse, and I wasn't able to see it, but glad you did, and congrats on your internship. That's awesome. And then Nikon's in space. Have any boosters been removed from flight status other than being expended? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, so for Block 5 boosters, that hasn't happened. So basically every booster that was not, let's say, that was not needed, it was just reserved for an expendable flight. And so we haven't seen any booster like that. We did see pre-Block 5 boosters that were just, after 1 or 2 flights, they were just taken apart and scrapped at McGregor. We if you're on L2, you can actually see some of these aerial pictures of McGregor, and sometimes you see some of the corpses, so to speak, of these deceased boosters. and so yeah, that's one of the things that I said before today on NSF Live. I also appeared there, and one of the things that someone said was, well, could they put on display this booster because it's so historic? And I was like, all of the boosters that they have on display, they are none of those are Block 5 boosters. And there's a reason why. Because Block 5 boosters, if it's the end of its life, just launch it again, but expendable. Go in a place of glory, I guess.
Yeah, I
And-
guess the one booster that is slightly different, although it was still
Mhm.
expended, was B1046 on
Mhm.
the in-flight abort test, where
That was a cool one.
yeah, blew up during Ascent, which was awesome to see, especially when everything was nominal and you still get to see this awesome explosion. That launch was very cool.
We just saw so that T-minus tournament event, you see that it has a stop. It's a little bit trickling. That is because it is already underway, the LOX load on the second stage. So we're progressing really well into the countdown here, and hopefully we'll see that launch in just 14 and a half minutes. By the way, I was talking before about the all of the launches that it had supported, and once a booster is not needed and whatnot, it just goes out in a place of glory or something like that at the end of its life. Well, this booster, it's actually one of the boosters that had, well, it's actually not one of them, it's the sort of like on the top one of boosters that has flown more satellites. So if you were to tell, you can see there, if you were to calculate how many satellites each booster has launched, B1058 is actually up there at the top, along with B1060, which has also flown 15 times. And the reason why, it's because it launched, I think, like 2 transporter missions that were like the most satellites of all of the transporter missions. So it wins for a long one. You see there that there are a lot of boosters that are in green. Those are the ones that have launched Starlink missions. So you see at the bottom, 53 was a side booster on a Falcon Heavy, on 3 Falcon Heavy flights actually, and then 46, it did 66 satellites, but it did not support any Starlink missions. So you can see everyone else is just, yeah, they have a lot of satellites launched because they were mostly Starlink missions.
Yeah, and B1058 launched Transporter 1, which was the most satellites ever launched on a vehicle to orbit.
Mhm.
Yeah, so here's an interesting question from CS Miller. Do customers at SpaceX get to decide if a booster is new or how many previous launches it's had? They're wondering more about how the booster is assigned to a mission. Do we know much about that, Alex?
Well, nowadays I don't think they get to decide, or if they do, there might be some kind of premium of, hey, okay, you decide, but you pay for it, right? And I can think of a few customers that actually might do that, namely NASA and the DoD, the Department of Defense, because at the end of the day, they call the shots, right? And they're like, we're paying you big money. Why not reserve this X or Y booster for us? And that's something that we've seen in the past where, at least for NASA missions, we've seen for certain missions that are very high priority, like crew missions and, very high priority science missions, have gotten like a reserve booster for them. This is just for you and not for anyone until we launch this mission. And then once that mission is launched, then the booster, it's moved along and flies some Starlink mission or whatnot. But yeah, and for DoD, it's kind of funny because I've said the high risk missions for NASA, but there's exceptions, and exceptions are things like a commercially contracted mission. For example, there are DoD missions like NROL 108 that flew on a very heavily used booster, and that was primarily because it was contracted via commercially, commercial services instead of the traditional more, you know, block buys like the National Security Space Launch acquisition and things like that. So it was a commercial acquisition rather than a more traditional acquisition. So in that sense, SpaceX calls the shots because it's more like, SES or Eutelsat or EchoStar or some other big telecom company. Hey, we want to launch on your rocket. So that is pretty much the same. And those customers do not get to choose their boosters pretty much. Like it's not really a thing.
Yeah, and even more interesting than that, I think, is in some of the newer launch contracts with SpaceX, SpaceX gets to choose the entire vehicle, whether that's Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, or even Starship. So SpaceX has definitely been trying to choose as much as they can to be advantageous to their launch schedule. A few more super chats from GoldWolf67. You all rock. You rock as well. Thank you for your support. Mr. Space, will Starship ever have the big payload door that, or just like in the old renders? Alex, can you give a quick answer to that since this isn't quite a Starship stream?
Well, we don't really know. It's something that they might be still, designing and prototyping at much smaller scales or something like that. We don't really know. That's the short answer, I guess.
All right. Then one more super chat real quick.
Well, it was will Starship ever? I mean, I thought it was actually when, and not will it. Yes, it will most likely have it. We just don't know when it's going to happen. Sorry. Yeah.
One more question real quick from Drew Nar, who is asking, what's the highest amount of flights that SpaceX has done on a non-Starlink mission? And the answer to that is 15 flights on Transporter 6, which B-1060 launched. So yeah.
And this one on the 14th flight also did a customer mission as well.
It's true.
With Luke Walker, I think it was.
Yeah, well, another quick question from David Kenny. Will this be a drone ship landing or RTLS, and which drone ship has the most landings?
Yeah, so this is going to be a drone ship landing on Just Read the Instructions, and actually I think that is the one with the most landings, or the second one most. It is the second one most. It is, of course, I still love you. This should be the 57th attempt at landing on Just Read the Instructions. If successful, it should be the 56th. Only one of those attempts actually failed.
Well, if you want to celebrate SpaceX's landings, you can head on over to shop.nasaspaceflight.com, where we have this awesome launch entry landing shirt, where it has the Merlin engine configuration from launch with all 9 lit, 3 during the entry burn, and 1 for the landing burn. Also, on NSF Store, you can check out some of our awesome metal prints we have, from that beautiful Falcon 9 shot on the left to Falcon Heavy to Starship to, so many gorgeous
both
photos.
The shirt and the liftoff shot, because you can see the 9 Merlin engines on the shirt, and then the real actual 9 Merlin engines, right? It's like
yeah, some of the metal prints that we have are absolutely gorgeous. All of NSF's photographers just...
You can even see the vents from the engines.
Yeah. Hats off to all of our photographers. Everyone should thank them in chat. Thank you for the amazing photos that you guys get us.
Because that was a segue, actually, because those vents are for the engine chill vent, and guess what? The engines are chilling down right now, because we passed T-minus 7 minutes.
Yeah. So Alex, could you explain what the engine chill vent is for? And we can't see anything right now, but if we'll be able to see anything in flight for it?
Yeah, that is very unlikely for the 9 Merlin engines on the bottom of the booster, but it is sometimes visible for the MVAC engine when we see these onboard shots from the booster, you see because the Merlin vacuum is inside of the intrastage, so there are like pipes that route that venting of the engine chill outside of the intrastage, and you can see that sort of when because that MVAC engine chill happens when it is in flight, and you sometimes see this venting on the side of the booster, and that is coming precisely from that MVAC. And yeah, that is precisely to be able to chill down the liquid oxygen pump, so that when you flow all of this liquid oxygen for the ignition of the booster of the engines, it just doesn't boil off and create like this sudden burst of gaseous oxygen that can damage a lot of your engine, or pretty much entirely your engine.
Yeah, and speaking of ignition, we're about 5 minutes away from launch, which means Max needs to go enjoy it. So Max, hope you get some amazing shots. Enjoy the launch.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I will see you on the other side, and Godspeed 1058.
Let's see it fly for a 16th time. A few more super chats from Callisto Horizons. How many total flights has Falcon 9 had versus number of boosters made and launched? Do you know that off the top of your head, Alex?
No, but I have a spreadsheet for that. Right now, they have done. So this will be the 200 and oh boy, because I have a lot of numbers here in front of me. Hold on. The 237th Falcon 9 orbital flight. It will be the 243rd total for all boosters. So the boosters that they have made 82 of them. Sorry, no, 77. The other 5 are still not flying. They have already completed pre-launch testing, or they are about to launch, but they have not launched yet. So yeah, 77 boosters that have been produced,
and right now on your
230.
Right now on your screen, you can see the strong back very slightly retracting, just by a few degrees, and then after liftoff, it will fall the remaining ways to pass 45 degrees to protect itself from the exhaust of the 9 Merlin engines. A few more super chats as we approach 3 minutes until today's launch. Also, that's an awesome shot on the left where you can see this is a very used fairing. Music of Wolves asks, any update on the Starship plushie? Thank you very much. As with We Will Rocket You with another gifted membership this stream, and Jeff Rao with another one. If you received one of those, make sure to thank them in chat. Thank you guys for the support.
It seems like the stream died.
Let's see, are we back? I see 5x5s in chat.
We're back. Okay.
Okay. It's not working in our Discord, so alright. We are about 2 minutes from launch. I'll give a few quick questions to you, Alex. Where do you think the limit of reuse is? Pushed to 20, 30 flights?
I think they're not going to go further from 20.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, especially with Starship somewhat close, like, not super necessary in my opinion. Do we know how confident SpaceX is that they'll be able to land the booster? Does age affect reliability?
I'm pretty sure they're confident that it's going to be landing. I just heard the call out of a stage 2 LOX load is complete, so Falcon 9 is already fully loaded with propellants for today's flight, and you can see there that purging of the lines ahead of liftoff, which will occur in about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Up next is going to be the transition from the ground computers to the onboard computers of that countdown. That is when the Falcon 9 enters into the startup sequence. So we should expect that to happen in about 3 seconds.
We are 1 minute from launch, and Falcon 9 is in startup, and the propellant tanks have begun pressurization to flight. Now, at T-minus 45 seconds or so, the launch director will verify their go for launch. And then we'll see engine ignition at 3 seconds before launch.
And they are go for launch. Falcon 9 is in startup, so everything is proceeding for flight.
30 seconds. You can really see how humid it is with how long those vapor trail is staying in the air.
58 is about to get on the edge of 17 real soon.
10 seconds. Ignition, and we have liftoff of the Starlink Group 6-5 mission. Has cleared the tower. If you are just now joining us, we just saw liftoff of the Starlink Group 6-5 mission from Space Launch Complex 40. The vehicle currently, or just passed through max Q, which occurred at T plus 1 minute and 12 seconds. The vehicle will now undergo a series of events here shortly, starting with shutdown of all 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, which with this view that we currently have, you will likely be able to see that they are shut down in a staggered pattern. And then shortly after that, we will have stage separation, which is where some pneumatics pushers between the first and second stages will push them apart. And right now you can see the plume getting wider as the vehicle gets higher in the atmosphere and pressure decreases. And then after stage separation, we will see second stage engines start. The first one of today, which will then carry the second stage into orbit.
We saw there Miko. And
ignition of second stage engine. And here on the right, you just saw the ring stiffener deploy that reduces vibrations in the engine nozzle during launch.
Up next should be that separation of the fairing.
Yep. And
I love this view.
So on the left, you can see the grid fins have deployed. And there goes the fairings. Now those are the 52 Starlink satellites going to orbit, which will hopefully help decrease the dongles needed for internet.
Apparently, these fairing halves have been are also reflown. I mean, that was very obvious from the ground shots, but Yeah, this we're flying for a 9th time.
That is not a record, but it is up there.
Yeah, it's really a lot, because right now the record is at 10 flights. But they're just one flight away from that 10, so the more flights, the better. The booster right now, it's pretty much in darkness, and coasting into that apogee of its flight, and it's gonna come down and do its entry burn into the atmosphere. First with a 1 engine, then 2 outer engines will ignite for a total of 3. They're going to be firing for about 10-15 seconds, and then they're going to shut down also in the same sequence, the 2 outer engines, and then the center engine as well. You can see there on the telemetry that the booster is now accelerating on the left-hand side, on the sort of bottom left corner. So it's speeding up, it's now coming back down.
It's crazy that this booster is doing this for the 16th time. And we have reports in our back channel that, as we were talking about earlier, the windows of people in the area, the windows were rattling like crazy, and that it was a very loud launch, which is awesome to hear. And here on the right, you can see the awesome shot that we love of an empty pad following a liftoff.
About to get that entry burn in just 30 seconds or so. It's gonna be 16th re-entry, which is exciting because it's like there's no other booster out there that has done this many launches and entries and landings and everything.
Yeah. So Max in our back channel is saying that he could feel it. And so Max, how was launch?
This is not like any other Starlink that has flown before, because we're back in unknown territory with Falcon 9. So that was, I don't want to say nerve-wracking, but you definitely have your eyeballs open more than you normally would. But that was beautiful. That one viewer who had a question about if the air quality or the air density affects the sound, it really does. And tonight it did. You didn't hear it so much as you did feel it. It was very, very thumpy.
Yeah, I imagine.
See that entry burn wrapping up. Yeah, now that this booster is the one that had the worm on it. Remember, if you remember. So now it's gonna be covered on even more soot from this entry burn. One of the things that I'm remembering right now, because it's also kind of transition moment here where we touched on NSF Live that the shuttle launched for the last time 12 years ago, and there was this phrase of the shoulders of the space shuttle America will continue to dream. And then when B-1058 flew on its Demo 2 mission, it was like they're continuing the dream. So this is sort of in that same line, like reusable rockets, flying people, flying a lot of times. It's just doing what it's doing best.
Yeah, Falcon 9 is definitely a workhorse. On that note, real quick, we have a gifted membership from Jeff Rowe with 1 Red Team membership. Thank you very much for your support. And friendly reminder to everyone that with Capcom, you can join our back channel where you can talk to Jack about turkey bacon, blastos, whatever, and have tons of fun. And space shuttle and all that. And we are coming up on the landing burn of B-1058 for its 16th time.
That makes me nervous. This is go time.
Come on, baby.
Gorgeous shot of landing right there. And that is touchdown. B-1058-16 just became B-1058-17 with successful landing. And coming up shortly, we have Seco 1. And there we have second engine cutoff 1. The second stage and payload stack will now coast until T plus 54 minutes and 9 seconds, where the engine will ignite for just under 2 seconds before it will deploy the 22 Starlink satellites at T plus 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 19 seconds. Cool, we have a few more questions real quick. Here's a Starship question that someone wants to know. Elon tweeted earlier about adding 3 more Raptors to this Starship when he tweeted a photo of S-25. What do you think about that, Alex? Do you think they're going to do that anytime soon?
My take is do it, not say it, because he's been saying it for a long time, and yeah, it's sparked a lot of conversations, but not really a lot of hardware that we've seen saying that yeah they're doing 9 engines on Starship. We haven't seen that.
Yeah. Roar Torque asks, will SpaceX send satellites to the moon and Mars for communications before future landings? Hi from Perth, Australia.
Oh boy. Well, we don't really know right now what are their plans for that, but one will assume that maybe their long-term plans do involve something like that. But right now, we're not fully sure if that's going to happen or not.
Right. Well, with that, thank you everybody for tuning in. Once again, I was your host, Trevor Sesnick, and with me was Alex and Max. Thank you guys very much for being on. Keep in mind, we have NSF Live from today that you can wrap up, and we'll be releasing more content during this week. So thanks everyone, have a great night.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
Our 68 chamber pressure looks good.
Rolling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange! Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! What is it? Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?